The city was quiet that evening. The streets were mostly empty, and only a few cars moved across the wide roads. The tall buildings stood with their lights shining like stars against the dark sky. Rosa walked slowly, her shoes tapping on the pavement. She had just finished her long shift at the hotel where she worked as a maid. Her body was tired, and her hands ached from cleaning and carrying, but her heart was calm. She always told herself, "It is another day finished. Tomorrow I will try again." Rosa carried a small bag with her. Inside were only a few things: an old purse, a folded scarf, and a sandwich she had saved for her younger brother. She was heading home, thinking of him. He was waiting for her in their little apartment. Her brother loved to hear about her day, even though Rosa never told him how hard the work was. She always said, "It was fine, don't worry." She wanted to protect him from worries, even if her own heart was heavy. As Rosa walked, she came closer to the bridge that crossed over the wide river. The water below was dark and deep, moving slowly under the night sky. She liked walking this way, because the sound of the river always gave her peace. But tonight, something was different. Ahead, at the middle of the bridge, she noticed a man standing alone. At first, she thought he was just looking at the water. But as she came closer, she saw he was standing very near the edge, too close, almost leaning forward. Her heart skipped a beat. Rosa slowed her steps. She looked carefully. The man was tall, wearing a neat coat, but his shoulders were bent low, as if carrying something heavy inside. His hands were gripping the railing tightly. His face was turned toward the dark water, and he did not notice Rosa walking closer. A cold feeling ran through Rosa. She understood what might happen. The man looked as if he wanted to jump. Her tiredness disappeared in that moment. She felt only fear for the stranger's life. Without thinking, she ran forward a few steps and cried out, her voice shaking in the cold air. "Don't jump." The words left her mouth louder than she expected. They echoed across the bridge, breaking the silence of the night. The man froze. Slowly, he turned his head. His eyes met hers. Rosa felt her breath catch. His eyes were not angry, but empty like windows with no light inside. He looked surprised that anyone had spoken to him. Rosa stopped a few feet away. She raised her hands gently, as if to show she meant no harm. "Please," she said softly now. "Step back. It's not the way." For a moment, the man said nothing. The wind brushed against them, carrying the faint smell of the river. Rosa's heart was beating fast, but she stood firmly, her eyes fixed on him. The man finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "Why do you care? You don't know me." Rosa shook her head. "I don't need to know you to care. Life is precious. Yours too." The man looked away, back to the water. His grip on the railing tightened again. Rosa quickly stepped closer, not too fast to scare him, but enough to show she would not leave him alone. "You don't understand," the man whispered. "Everything is gone. There's nothing left for me." Rosa's heart ached at his words. She thought of her own struggles, long hours at work, the worry of paying rent, her brother's needs. She too had moments when life felt too heavy. But she had always chosen to fight one more day. She wished she could place that strength inside the stranger's heart. She said softly, "I may not understand your pain, but I know what it feels like to carry heavy things. Still, every morning I wake and tell myself to try again. That is why I am standing here now. That is why I saw you." The man's shoulders shook slightly, as if her words touched something inside. Rosa took another small step forward. "You are not alone tonight. I am here. If you feel no one cares, at least know this: I care. Please step back." For a long moment, the man did not move. The river below seemed louder, rushing like time running away. Rosa's hands trembled, but she reached out carefully, holding onto the cold railing near him. Her eyes never left his face. Finally, the man let out a slow breath. His fingers loosened. He stepped one small step backward, away from the edge. Rosa felt relief flood her chest. She almost cried, but she held it inside. "Thank you," she whispered. The man looked at her again, his expression mixed with sadness and surprise. He still looked broken, but now there was a small spark in his eyes, as if he was beginning to feel the weight of what he almost did. They stood in silence for a while. The night air wrapped around them, cool and gentle. Rosa knew this was only the beginning of something. She had stopped him for now, but his story was not finished. She tightened her grip on her bag and said softly, "Come, let's sit for a while. You don't have to speak. Just don't stand at the edge anymore." The man said nothing, but slowly, he nodded. Together, they moved toward the bench near the middle of the bridge, away from the dangerous edge. As Rosa sat beside him, she looked at the dark water below. She thought about how close he had been to falling, how close life had been to ending. And she thought about how strange it was how two strangers from different worlds could meet like this, in one moment that might change both their lives forever. The city lights reflected in the river, and Rosa whispered to herself, "Tonight, hope did not drown." The bench on the bridge was cold, but Rosa did not care. She sat beside the stranger quietly, giving him time to breathe. His hands were resting on his knees, but they were still trembling. His face was pale under the streetlight, and his eyes looked tired, like he had not slept for days. For a while, they both sat in silence. Rosa did not push him with questions. She only wanted him to know that he was not alone. The sound of the river below filled the air, steady and calm, as if reminding them that life keeps moving. Finally, the man spoke. His voice was soft, almost broken. "Why did you stop me? You don't even know me." Rosa turned her head and looked at him gently. "Because I saw someone who was about to throw away something too precious. I couldn't walk past you and pretend I didn't see." The man let out a bitter laugh. "Precious? You think my life is precious? To me, it feels like a weight I can't carry anymore." Rosa's heart tightened at his words. She could hear the deep pain behind them. She folded her hands in her lap and said softly, "Maybe I don't understand everything you are carrying. But I know one thing. Life is a gift. Sometimes it feels heavy, but it can also surprise us when we least expect it." The man shook his head. "You're kind, but you don't know. I've lost everything." Rosa hesitated. She wanted to ask what he had lost, but she did not want to push too hard. Instead, she leaned back slightly and spoke about herself. "I know what it feels like to be close to giving up. My life is not easy either. I work all day as a maid, cleaning rooms, carrying trays, always rushing. People don't even look at me most of the time. They see only the uniform, not the person." The man glanced at her with a faint expression of surprise, as if he did not expect her to share something so personal. Rosa continued. "Still, I keep going. I have a younger brother waiting for me at home. He depends on me. Some days I feel tired to the bone, but when I see his smile, I remember why I must keep trying." The man lowered his eyes. His hands clenched together, and his shoulders bent forward even more. "At least you have someone who needs you. I have no one." Rosa looked at him with sympathy. "Maybe you feel alone now. But even the loneliest heart can be reached. If I, a stranger, can sit here and care enough to stop you, doesn't that mean you are not completely alone?" The man did not answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the ground. Then, after a long silence, he whispered, "My name is Daniel." Rosa smiled gently. "It's good to meet you, Daniel." "I'm Rosa." He nodded faintly, as if repeating her name in his mind. Then he sighed. Rosa, I wasn't lying. I feel like my life is over. I had everything: money, success, even respect from others. But none of it means anything now. My days are empty. My nights are worse. I can't escape the feeling that nothing matters anymore. Rosa listened carefully. She noticed his clothes again: expensive fabric, polished shoes. She wondered who he really was, but she did not ask. She only focused on his pain. Money and success can fill your hands, Rosa said softly, but they can't always fill your heart. Maybe what you are missing is not something you can buy. Daniel looked at her sharply, almost offended, but then his expression softened. You speak like you know. Rosa gave a small nod. I don't have riches. I don't have freedom from worry. But I know that love, kindness, and hope are what make life worth living. Without them, even gold feels heavy. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Her words sank into him like water into dry ground. The bridge was quiet except for the hum of the city far away. Daniel opened his eyes again and whispered, Do you really believe there's hope left for me? Rosa placed her hand gently on the bench between them, not touching him but close enough to show she was present. If there wasn't, then I would not be here with you tonight. Hope brought me across this bridge at the right time. Maybe that's not an accident. Daniel stared at her, searching her face for any sign of false comfort. But her eyes were steady, simple, and true. His chest rose and fell with a long breath. You don't know how close I was. If you had not come, his voice trailed off, but Rosa understood. Then I am glad I was here, she said softly. For the first time, Daniel's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, though it was sad. You're a stranger, and yet you've done more for me tonight than people I've known for years. Rosa shook her head gently. Maybe I'm not a stranger anymore. Sometimes life brings people together at the exact moment they are needed. The river continued to flow beneath the bridge, carrying the weight of their silence. Daniel leaned back against the bench, his shoulders still heavy but no longer ready to break. Rosa sat beside him, watching the water, knowing that something important had just begun. The night grew colder as Rosa and Daniel sat on the bridge. The air carried the smell of the river, mixed with the faint scent of flowers from a nearby park. Rosa pulled her scarf tighter around her shoulders, but she did not move away. She wanted Daniel to know she was not going to leave him alone. Daniel rested his elbows on his knees and kept staring at the ground. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke again. Rosa, do you ever feel like you are living someone else's life? Like you wake up each day and play a part, but deep down, it doesn't feel real? Rosa thought about his words. She shook her head gently. My life is not easy, but it is mine. Every day I know I am living for my brother and for myself. Maybe I get tired, maybe I get sad, but I know my life is real. Why do you feel like yours is not? Daniel gave a long, tired sigh. Because everything people see of me is a mask. They think I have it all, but inside, I feel empty. Rosa studied his face. His neat coat, his polished shoes, the way he carried himself even now, sitting broken on a bench, she could tell he was not an ordinary man. She wanted to understand, but she waited patiently for him to explain. After a long silence, Daniel finally said, You know the tall glass building in the center of the city? The one with the golden lights at the top. Rosa nodded. She had passed by it many times on her way to work. It was a famous place, one of the tallest towers in the city. She had always imagined the people inside lived very different lives from hers. Daniel lowered his head. That building is mine. My family built it. My name is written on the company. People call me successful, powerful, even lucky. But they don't see what it cost me. Rosa's eyes widened. Her lips parted in shock, but no words came out at first. She had heard of that building many times. The company's name appeared in newspapers, on television, in magazines. And now she was sitting beside the man behind it? You are that Daniel?" she asked softly. He gave a small nod, his expression bitter. "Yes. The same Daniel they write about in papers. The man they call a billionaire. To the world, I look like someone who should have no worries. But what good is all the money when there's no one to share it with?" Rosa's heart softened. She had always imagined people like him were untouchable, living a life filled with joy and comfort. But here he was, telling her his heart was empty. She realized wealth did not protect anyone from loneliness. Daniel went on, his voice heavy with memory. "My parents passed away years ago. I grew up with responsibility on my shoulders, running the business, making sure it grew bigger. People praised me, admired me, but every smile around me was bought with my success. I don't know who truly cared for me. And when the lights go out, when the meetings are over, I return to an empty home." Rosa listened quietly, her fingers tightening around her scarf. She thought of her own small apartment, her brother waiting with warm eyes, the simple dinners they shared. It was not much, but it was love. For the first time, she felt thankful for what little she had. She looked at Daniel gently. "You have everything people dream of, but maybe you are missing the one thing that makes life worth living: connection." Daniel's eyes turned toward her. "Connection," he repeated slowly, as if the word itself felt unfamiliar. "Yes," Rosa said. "Not the kind that comes from contracts or deals. The kind that comes from knowing someone truly sees you, without expecting anything in return." For a moment, neither spoke. The night air wrapped around them, filled with the quiet hum of the city far away. Daniel's gaze softened, and he whispered, "Do you know you are the first person in years to speak to me like this? With no fear, no hidden desire, no request. Just truth." Rosa gave a small smile. "Maybe because I don't see your towers or your money. I only see the man who almost gave up on himself tonight." Her words struck Daniel deeply. He looked at her as if she had uncovered a part of him no one else had dared to touch. "Why do you care so much?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly. "You could have walked past me and never looked back. Why stop for me?" Rosa thought for a moment, then answered softly, "Because I know what it feels like to be unseen. And tonight, I could not let you disappear without someone saying, 'You matter.'" Daniel's throat tightened. For years he had lived surrounded by people, yet none of them had ever spoken such simple words to him. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was softer now, filled with something unspoken but alive. Daniel leaned back against the bench, his eyes glancing at the river. For the first time that night, he did not look like he was ready to jump. Rosa sat beside him, her thoughts turning. She had never expected her path to cross with someone like him. Yet she understood that in this moment, titles and riches did not matter. They were just two souls, both searching for meaning in a wide, lonely world. The river flowed steadily under the bridge, carrying away the shadows of the night. Rosa looked at Daniel, and in her heart, she knew this meeting was only the beginning of something neither of them had planned but perhaps both of them needed. The next morning, Rosa woke early as she always did. Her little brother, Luis, was still asleep, curled up under a thin blanket. She stood quietly by his bedside, brushing back his hair. Her heart softened as she looked at him. Every long hour of work, every tired night she endured them for him. After leaving a small sandwich for his breakfast, Rosa hurried to the hotel. She tied her uniform neatly and began her day. The hotel was large and bright, filled with travelers and guests who moved about without ever noticing the maids. Rosa kept her head down, polishing, dusting, carrying. It was the same rhythm she had followed for years. But today, something felt different. Her mind kept going back to the bridge, to Daniel. She remembered the emptiness in his eyes and the weight in his voice. She remembered how he had whispered that no one cared for him. And she remembered his surprise when she had spoken with simple honesty. She wondered if he was all right now. She wondered if he had found the strength to face another day. Later that evening, as Rosa was folding towels near the front desk, she felt a strange pause in the air. Guests were passing through as usual, but one man stood out. He was dressed in a plain shirt and simple trousers, unlike the fine suit he had worn on the bridge. Yet even with his humble clothing, Rosa recognized him instantly. It was Daniel. Her hands froze on the towels. She had not expected to see him again, at least not so soon. He walked slowly toward her, his steps uncertain, as if he did not know whether he belonged there. When their eyes met, Rosa gave him a small, polite nod, the kind she would give to any guest. Daniel smiled faintly, then spoke in a low voice. "Rosa. I wanted to see you again." Her heart skipped. She placed the towels aside and glanced around to be sure no one was listening. "You came here," she whispered. "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "I know this is where you work. I wanted to thank you again for last night." Rosa studied him carefully. He looked calmer than before, though the sadness had not fully left his eyes. "I'm glad you are safe," she said softly. Daniel hesitated, then asked, "Can we talk?" "Not here, but somewhere quiet." Rosa thought for a moment. It was unusual, even risky, for someone like her to spend time with a man like him. But something in his voice made her feel he was not coming as a billionaire tonight, but as a man searching for peace. She nodded slowly. After her shift ended, Rosa met him outside. They walked to a small park nearby where children's laughter still echoed from swings and slides. The air smelled of fresh grass, and the lamps along the path glowed warmly. They sat on a wooden bench. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel said, "I couldn't stop thinking about our talk on the bridge. No one has spoken to me like that in years. You reminded me that money doesn't mean life. People do." Rosa listened, then said gently, "Sometimes people forget that simple things matter more than grand ones. A meal shared, a smile given, a hand to hold. That is what keeps a heart alive." Daniel turned his head toward her. "Tell me more about your life. I want to know." Rosa hesitated, unused to anyone asking. Still, she told him. She spoke of her long hours at the hotel, of her brother Luis, of the small apartment they shared. She told him about the times she came home with aching feet but still managed to smile for her brother, because his joy gave her strength. Daniel listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face. He looked amazed. "You carry so much, yet you still smile. How do you do it?" Rosa shrugged softly. "Because giving up is not an option. Luis needs me. And I believe tomorrow can be better, even if today is hard." Her words sank into Daniel's heart. For so long, he had thought strength came from power, from money, from control. But here was Rosa, a woman with little, yet stronger than anyone he had ever known. Then Rosa asked, "And you? Tell me about your life. Not the business, not the buildings. You. What is it like for you when the world is quiet?" Daniel's eyes darkened. He spoke slowly, as if opening a locked door. "It is lonely. My house is large, but the rooms echo. My table is filled with food, but I eat alone. Every smile I see around me belongs to someone who wants something from me. And when the doors close, I feel like I am nothing but an empty name." Rosa's chest tightened. She looked at him with soft eyes. "That sounds heavy, Daniel. No wonder you felt so lost." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "Yes. And last night, I thought the river was the only way to end it. He paused, then added, "But then you came. A stranger who looked at me like a person, not a name. You reminded me I am still human." Rosa felt her eyes sting with emotion. She placed her hand lightly on the bench, close to his. Sometimes, that is all a person needs to be seen. Daniel looked at her hand, then at her face. A quiet gratitude shone in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt a warmth that money could not buy. The night deepened around them, but neither wanted to leave. They spoke of simple things: the color of the sky at sunset, the sound of laughter, the comfort of family. Two very different worlds were meeting, but in that park, they did not feel so far apart. When it was time to part, Daniel stood and said softly, "Rosa, may I see you again?" Rosa hesitated, then smiled gently. "Yes. But not as a rich man. Just as Daniel." He nodded, a true smile touching his lips this time. "Just as Daniel." As Rosa walked home that night, she felt a strange warmth in her heart. She did not know where this path would lead, but she knew one thing: their worlds had touched, and neither of them would be the same again. The days that followed felt different for both Rosa and Daniel. For Rosa, life at the hotel continued as usual: long hours of cleaning, folding, and serving. Yet in her heart, she carried a new thought. Somewhere beyond the walls of the hotel, there was a man who had once stood on the edge of the bridge, and now, somehow, he was choosing life again. For Daniel, the world looked less empty than before. He still attended his business meetings and signed important papers, but his mind often wandered back to the park bench where Rosa had spoken to him with honesty and warmth. Her words echoed in him: "Sometimes, that is all a person needs to be seen." One afternoon, Rosa was carrying a tray of fresh towels through the hotel corridor when she noticed a familiar figure standing near the lobby. He was dressed simply again: no expensive suit, no shining shoes, just a plain shirt and trousers. But Rosa recognized him immediately. "Daniel," she whispered when she reached him. He smiled gently. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to see you." Rosa glanced around, worried her co-workers might notice. "People here don't know who you really are, do they?" Daniel shook his head. "Not like this. I came as just a man, not the name they write in newspapers." Something in his voice made Rosa relax. She nodded slowly. "Then you are welcome." From that day on, Daniel began visiting Rosa more often. Sometimes, he waited outside the hotel until her shift ended. Sometimes, they met at the little park nearby. They would sit on the same wooden bench, talking softly as the lamps glowed around them. Their conversations were simple. Rosa told him about her brother's school, about the little things that made her smile, like the way the sun painted gold on the rooftops in the evening. Daniel told her about his travels, not the glamorous details, but the quiet moments he remembered, like watching the sea from a lonely hotel balcony or hearing a child laugh in a crowded street. The more they talked, the more Daniel felt the heavy emptiness inside him grow lighter. Rosa's presence gave him comfort, though she never tried to impress him. She spoke with honesty, listened with patience, and smiled with kindness. One evening, after Rosa's shift, she found Daniel waiting by the street. They walked together slowly, their steps falling in rhythm. "You know," Daniel said softly, "I think about that night on the bridge every day. I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been there." Rosa looked ahead, her voice calm. "But I was there. That is what matters." He nodded, his heart tightening. "Yes. You saved me." Rosa shook her head. "No, Daniel. I didn't save you. You chose to step back. You chose to listen. That was your strength." Her words touched him deeply. For years, people had praised him for his wealth, his power, his business. But no one had ever praised him for his strength as a human being. It made him feel seen in a way he had long forgotten. Days turned into weeks. Their bond grew silently, without grand promises or dramatic words. Rosa would sometimes laugh at something small, and Daniel found himself laughing too. She would sometimes share her worries, and Daniel would listen with a heart more open than ever before. One Saturday, Daniel asked softly, "Rosa, may I meet your brother one day?" Rosa was surprised. She had never imagined Daniel wanting to enter her small, simple world. She hesitated, then smiled gently. "Maybe. He would like you. He has a kind heart." Daniel's eyes softened. "Then I would like him too." That night, Rosa returned home to Luis, who was waiting eagerly with a plate of bread and tea. He looked at her and asked, "You seem happier these days, Rosa." "Why?" She smiled and brushed his hair. "Because I met someone who reminds me that even in sadness, we can find hope." Luis grinned. "Then I am glad. You always bring me hope, Rosa." Her heart warmed at his words. She thought of Daniel and the silent bond that was forming between them, gentle, steady, and unspoken. Meanwhile, Daniel began to notice changes in himself. He worked less at night and spent more time walking in the city, seeing people he had once ignored. He noticed street musicians, children playing, vendors calling out their goods. Life no longer looked like an empty performance. It looked real. He realized it was Rosa's influence. She had taught him, without meaning to, that the small things gave life its beauty. One evening, as they sat by the park fountain, Daniel turned to Rosa. His voice was quiet but firm. "I don't feel as lost as before. I think it's because of you." Rosa looked down, her cheeks warming. "It's not me, Daniel. It's because you opened your heart to life again." Daniel studied her face, the honesty in her eyes. He knew she was being humble, but he also knew she had been the spark. The silent bond between them grew stronger each day. It was not yet love, not yet spoken as anything beyond friendship, but it was powerful. Daniel no longer felt invisible in his grand house, and Rosa no longer felt unseen in her uniform. They had found someone who truly listened, someone who truly cared. As the days passed, they both began to understand sometimes the strongest ties are not loud or dramatic. They are quiet, steady, and built from moments of truth. And though they did not say it aloud, both Rosa and Daniel felt in their hearts that their paths, once so far apart, were slowly weaving together into something new. The bond between Rosa and Daniel grew quietly over the next weeks. They met whenever they could, sometimes in the park, sometimes outside the hotel, and sometimes just walking through quiet streets where no one paid attention. Rosa began to notice how Daniel's laughter came more easily now, how his eyes no longer carried the same emptiness as the night on the bridge. But as their meetings grew, so did the risk of others noticing. One morning at the hotel, Rosa overheard two co-workers whispering near the laundry room. "Have you seen Rosa lately? Always stepping outside after her shift," one said with a smirk. "Yes, and sometimes there's a man waiting for her," the other added. "Not one of our usual guests. I wonder who he is." Rosa froze when she heard their words. Her face warmed with embarrassment. She had done nothing wrong, yet she feared gossip could turn cruel. She continued her work quietly, pretending she hadn't heard. That evening, as she stepped out of the hotel, she found Daniel waiting, dressed simply again. His face brightened when he saw her, but Rosa's heart felt heavy. "Daniel," she said softly, "people are starting to notice. I don't want trouble at my job." Daniel's smile faded. "I'm sorry, Rosa. I never wanted to cause you problems." She shook her head. "It's not your fault. But the world doesn't always understand friendship between two different lives." Daniel looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. "Then let them misunderstand. I know the truth." But Rosa lowered her gaze. She wasn't sure if truth alone would protect her. Days later, the whispers grew louder. A hotel guest spotted Daniel waiting for Rosa and recognized him despite his plain clothes. The news spread quickly: the billionaire visits a maid after work. By the end of the week, Rosa's co-workers were looking at her with suspicion. Some teased her, some avoided her, and some treated her with open jealousy. One evening, the hotel manager called Rosa into the office. His voice was firm. "Rosa, I've heard talk about you meeting someone important outside. I want to remind you that this hotel values reputation. Be careful not to bring attention we don't need." Rosa left the office with her hands shaking. She felt tears pressing behind her eyes. She had never asked for Daniel's company, never sought his wealth, yet now her honesty was being questioned. That night, when she met Daniel, her face was pale with worry. He noticed at once. "What happened?" he asked gently. She told him everything: the gossip, the manager's warning, the looks from co-workers. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "They think I want your money. They think I am using you. Daniel, I can't live under such judgment." Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to protect her, to tell the world they were wrong. But he also knew his name carried weight that she could not escape. He reached for her hand carefully, his voice steady. "Rosa, look at me. I don't care what they say. You saved me that night, not for my wealth, but because you cared. That truth matters more than all their words." Rosa shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But their words hurt, Daniel. I am only a maid. I don't have the power to fight them." Daniel's eyes softened. "Then let me fight for you." She pulled her hand back gently, shaking her head. "No, Daniel. If you fight for me, the gossip will grow worse. They will say I trapped you. They will say I want what isn't mine. I don't want to be the reason your life gets harder." Her words pierced his heart. For a moment, he had no answer. He had faced businessmen, judges, and leaders, but he did not know how to face Rosa's fear of losing her dignity. Silence hung between them. The sound of crickets filled the night air. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice low but firm. "Rosa, I cannot walk away. You are the reason I am alive. Without you, I am lost again." Rosa looked at him with wet eyes. She wanted to believe, but her heart was heavy with doubt. She whispered, "Then what do we do, Daniel? How do we hold on when the world pushes us apart?" Daniel's gaze was steady, filled with quiet strength. "We trust. We hold on to the truth, even if others cannot see it. You are not alone, Rosa. Not anymore." His words sank deep into her heart. She knew the days ahead would not be easy. But she also knew Daniel was no longer the man ready to jump from the bridge. He was stronger now, and part of that strength was his choice to stand beside her. That night, Rosa walked home slowly. Louise noticed her silence and asked gently, "Sister, are you sad?" Rosa forced a small smile. "No, Louise. Just tired." But inside, she carried both fear and hope. Fear of the judgment around her, and hope in the bond that had begun between her and Daniel. As for Daniel, he sat alone in his grand house that night, staring out the window at the city lights. He thought of Rosa's tears, of the unfair words she faced. His heart ached, but it was also determined. He whispered to himself, "She saved me once. Now it is my turn to protect her." The world might doubt their bond, but Daniel knew one truth: he would not let Rosa face it alone. The days that followed were heavy for Rosa and Daniel. Whispers in the hotel did not stop, and Daniel's name appeared in quiet corners of newspapers, hinting at a mysterious maid he met in the evenings. Rosa tried to stay strong, but every look from her co-workers felt like a stone pressing on her chest. At night, she lay awake, wondering if she had made a mistake letting Daniel stay in her life. Yet, when she remembered the broken man standing on the bridge that night, She knew she could not turn away. Daniel, too, wrestled with the storm. For the first time in years, he had found something real, something not tied to money, power, or fame. He could not let gossip take it away. But he also feared Rosa's heart might give in to the pressure before his words reached her fully. One late evening, after Rosa finished her shift, she found Daniel waiting again. His face was serious, but his eyes carried a warmth she had come to trust. "Rosa," he said softly, "come with me tonight. There is something I need to show you." Rosa hesitated. "Where?" He held out his hand, not demanding, but inviting. "Back to the bridge." Her heart skipped. The memory of that night was sharp, his shaking hands, her desperate plea, the weight of his pain. But she nodded quietly, slipping her hand into his. They walked through the city in silence. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. Cars passed, people hurried by, but for Rosa and Daniel, the world seemed to fade until only the sound of their footsteps remained. When they reached the bridge, Rosa stopped. The sight of the railing sent a shiver through her body. She could still see him leaning forward, ready to fall. Daniel stepped closer to the railing, but not in the same way as before. He stood tall this time, his shoulders straight, his eyes calm. He turned to her and said, "That night, I was ready to end everything. I had lost myself. I thought there was no reason to stay." Rosa's hands tightened nervously. "Daniel," he smiled gently. "But then I heard your voice. 'Don't jump,' you said." It was simple, but it was enough to break the silence inside me. "You gave me something money never could hope." Tears filled Rosa's eyes. She had not realized how deeply those two words had mattered. Daniel looked out at the dark water below. "I brought you here because I want you to see me now. I am no longer the man ready to give up. I am alive because of you. And I want to live not for myself alone, but for the people who matter, people like you, and Luis, and anyone who carries pain but keeps walking forward." Rosa felt her chest tighten with emotion. She whispered, "But Daniel, the world doesn't understand us. They think I want something from you." He turned to her fully, his eyes steady. "Let them think what they want. I don't care about their judgment. What I care about is the truth. Rosa, you gave me life. That is a gift I cannot repay with gold or houses. The only way I can honor it is by living honestly, and by standing with you no matter what others say." Her tears spilled, but this time they were not from fear, they were from the warmth of his words. She nodded slowly. "Then we will face it together." At that moment, a gentle wind brushed across the bridge. It felt like the night itself was listening. They stood side by side in silence, their hands brushing against each other until Daniel carefully took hers. The city lights glowed faintly around them, but here on the bridge, it was quiet, almost peaceful. Finally, Rosa spoke, her voice trembling but strong. "Do you know what I prayed for that night after I stopped you?" Daniel shook his head. "I prayed that one day you would see yourself the way I saw you. Not as a broken man, but as someone worth saving." Daniel's eyes glistened. He whispered, "And tonight, because of you, I finally do." For the first time since that dark night, Rosa felt the weight lift from her heart. The bridge was no longer a place of despair. It had become a place of beginnings. They stayed there for a while, letting the night hold them in its quiet arms. Then Daniel said softly, "Rosa, whatever comes, promise me we won't let go of this. Promise me we'll keep walking forward." Rosa squeezed his hand. "I promise." When they finally walked away from the bridge, it felt different. The same structure that had once almost stolen Daniel's life now carried the memory of his second chance. Back in her small home, Rosa told Luis about the night. His young eyes widened with wonder. "So the bridge is special now," he said with a smile. "Yes," Rosa replied, stroking his hair gently. It is where despair turned into hope. Daniel, sitting quietly beside them, added, and where strangers became family. The three of them shared a quiet meal that night. There was no gold on the table, no fine dishes, no cameras, but there was laughter, warmth, and something stronger than all the rumors outside. It was not an ending, but a beginning. The world might still whisper, people might still misunderstand, but Rosa and Daniel had already faced the hardest night together. The bridge had tested them, and now it blessed them. As Rosa looked at Daniel, she no longer saw the man ready to fall. She saw a man ready to live, ready to protect, and ready to keep the promise of hope alive. And Daniel, looking at Rosa, no longer saw just the maid who had grabbed his arm. He saw the heart that had saved his life and the heart he would cherish for the rest of his days. The bridge was behind them, but the journey ahead was theirs to share.